In our last video, we looked at how to solve quadratic functions using the quadratic formula. So functions like this, the 3m squared minus 4m minus 64 equals 0. They were already in this ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 form. So we could say a equals 3, b equals negative 4, c equals negative 64, and then plug them into this formula. When we did that, the very first step looked something like this. We had all of those numbers put together, and that should all equal out the two different answers, one where we did plus, one where we did minus, the two different answers that we would get for our variable. Now, instead of doing all of this and going one step at a time, once you have this piece set up, so you know what value goes where, you can just plug it all into your calculator and it'll solve it for you. I'm going to show you how to do that on this piece of software. The software I was able to find that kind of matches your calculator uses the 9860. So this is not the exact calculator that I know most of you use. You have the 9750, but this one will still work. It looks similar enough to yours. It should still work. Now, what we're going to do here, looking back at our problem, we're going to use these values for A, B, and C, and we're going to type them into our calculator just like this. We are basically going to make this problem on our calculator screen. So this is how we do it. You first off open up a parentheses. This parentheses that you're opening puts everything on top together. All of this will happen first before you divide by everything down here. So that parentheses kind of starts everything off, and you need to do negative b. So we do negative, then parentheses, whatever your b value is. Now ours happened to be negative 4, so it's negative 4. Okay, whatever b value you have, you would plug it in here. So let's say we didn't have a negative 4, say it was a positive 7. You would put 7 in this parentheses. Now again, you have to make sure it's a negative on the outside so it makes whatever value in here negative, or the opposite of it. So negative 4. Also be careful on both of these, this negative sign and this negative sign, that you are actually hitting the negative sign, not the minus sign. This is an operator, it's telling it to subtract. This is a sign indicator, it's saying it has to be the negative version of that. So make sure you're hitting negative in both of these cases. Now, move back over, to the end. The first time we go through this process, we're going to do plus. The second time we'll use minus, but for now, first one we'll do plus. After negative b, quadratic formula continues to say plus or minus square root. So now we put in our square root. After you put in the square root symbol, and again that was just by hitting shift and then the x squared button because the square root is right above it, start a parentheses. This again will let us show that everything inside here is underneath our square root. So negative b on the outside here, plus or minus, this case we're doing plus, the square root of b squared. So what we're going to do is start a second parentheses. This parentheses is letting us do whatever is b in that form. So negative 4, missed the 4. Negative 4 is what's going to be squared. Back one, squared. Now notice on this calculator, I don't know if it does it on yours, but it kind of resizes this to show you that it's this whole thing that's being squared. If you didn't have this set of parentheses and it looked something like this, get rid of that and get rid of this, and then just have the squared here, what this is telling the calculator to do is to take 4, square it to get 16, and then make it negative, because order of operations says that squaring something, the exponent, happens before making it a negative. So we want to make sure, again, we come before this, go at the front, start a parentheses off right here before you do anything else. Again, now it's not going to be negative 16 in the end, because 4 squared is 16, negative of that would be negative 16. Now it'll be a positive 16, because it's saying take negative 4 and multiply that by itself, square that. So negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Now at the end of all that, so this is the square root of b squared minus, we want 4 times a times c. So this is where you go times a, which was 3, times c, which was negative 64. So this is telling the calculator, Again, it's smart enough to recognize the order of operations. Multiply comes before subtract. So it'll multiply these numbers first, then subtract it from whatever this came out to be. Again, this came out to 16 minus all of this. Now, this is where you end that parentheses. Again, it kind of resized this parentheses. We can see it's the bigger one here that's ending. What this is telling the calculator to do is take all of this as one number and take the square root of that number. So that's what's being square rooted in the end. Now, move to the outside of that square root, add another parentheses. Notice this parentheses, at least on this calculator, is really, really big, even bigger than the square root. It finishes off of this one. This was our starting parentheses that started the whole process, negative b plus the square root of all of this underneath here, b squared minus 4ac. This was everything that was on top of our quadratic formula. Again, looking back, it was all of this right here. We still have to do everything divided by 2 times a. So on the calculator, we will do divided by, start another parentheses, 2 times whatever your a value was. In this case, ours was 3, end the parentheses. So your entire thing should look something like this. Start a parentheses, negative. Start a parentheses, whatever your b value is. Ours was negative 4. End the parentheses, plus. Start a square root. Start 2 parentheses, 1 just for b, whatever your b value is. End the parentheses and then square it. Minus 4 times your a value. Oops, I want to click this button. Times your c value. Close the parentheses because that'll close off everything underneath the square root. Close the parentheses again because that closes everything that's on top. So this was our whole numerator. That is all being divided by, so divided by in parentheses 2 times a. And our a value was 3. Now again, these parentheses are very important because if you don't have them, it says take all of this value, divide it by 2, then whatever answer you get, multiply that up by 3. So technically, it would be like taking this 3 and putting it on top with the numerator. So you have to make sure this is under a parentheses so it knows to put these two together. When we hit enter then, it'll solve all that out, and one of our answers, 5.3 repeated, or 5 1/3. If we go back to this problem, 16 over 3, 3 goes into 16 5 times and leaves 1 left over. So this was 5 1/3, or 16/3. On your calculator, if you wanted to see that, 5.3 repeating, as a fraction, we hit this button, that F arrow to D, so fractions to decimals, 16/3. That was, again, exactly what we got right here, 16/3. So that's one of our answers. To get the other answer, we can use our arrow key, go up to this one, and I'm just going to move all the way back. We're not going to type everything in again. We're just going to move back, change this plus, delete it, call it a minus. Again, it has to be minus, not negative. It's not that it's a negative of all this, it's that we're subtracting it. There's a difference between an operator and a sign. So we'll do the same thing, we'll just call it minus instead of plus. Run the whole thing and it'll come out to a -4 this time. So that's our second answer, which we got over here. We got a -4. So you can run the whole thing on your calculator from start to finish all in one swoop, but you do need to make sure you know your A, B, and C value and plug them in correctly. I'm going to go up again and go back to this. I'm going to show you how to do the next, not this next one, we're going to do this one. The 6n squared plus 4n equals -3. Now we had to change that, add 3 to both sides to get 6n squared plus 4n plus 3 equals 0. So here are A, B, and C values, and this is what we would be plugging in to the calculator. So we have a -4, a 4 going here, that's negative, the 4 here, the 6, and the 3, and the 6. So I'm going to go back to my calculator. Instead of plugging in everything all over, I'm just going to start at the beginning and take out a couple pieces. Right here we have a negative. In this spot is our B value. Our B value is 4. So I'm just going to simply change out these B values. Instead of -4, they're now +4. As we keep going through our quadratic formula, it's 4 times A times C. Well, our A value is no longer 3. In our formula, or our function, is going to be 6. And this C value was not -64. it was 3. So 4 times 6 times 3. And if we come back to this one, here it is, 4 times 6 times 3. And it's all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 6. So I'm going to continue my way down here. We'll call it 2 times 6. Now, as long as what we've typed in is exactly like what we had on our last quadratic formula, so all of this here works, I'm going to go back and we're going to do the first one as a plus. Now when I hit enter, it should run the whole thing for me. Now, in this case, sometimes on your calculator, if it's not set to take complex numbers, it'll come up with a little thing that says error, no real solution. Now in this case, it kind of simplified it a little bit for us to put it in a complex form, but this I value means imaginary. It means that there's no real solution. It'll come out as a complex or an imaginary number. So on your calculator, it probably says error, non-real answer. When it does that, what it's saying is underneath this square root, we have a negative. And that's what happened right here. We got to square root of negative 56. So there are no real solutions. Now again, this calculator went on to simplify that a little more and put it in a complex form. I don't want you to put yours into complex form. Just circle your answer as no real solution. So right here, it should look something like this. But again, this is how you would plug it into the calculator to find that there's no real solution. Just follow these steps up here, plugging it in like that. Your calculator will solve any quadratic formula or function for you. So that is it for our quadratics video.